What can you do when you are clear about your message? You know the tools that you can use to soothe your nervous system, but you still feel completely terrified to be visible or to be seen. My name is Danielle Gardner. I'm a messaging and marketing mentor, and I'm here today to discuss this topic with Liesel who mentors introverts and sensitive people. Hey, Liesel, thank you for joining me in this conversation today.
Thanks, Danielle. It's really great to be here.
So let's get straight into this. What do you think, or what have you found through your work with people is the cause of this terror? You know, they're clear on the message, they've got tools, but they're still completely terrified.
Such a great question. And where my mind goes to immediately is, there's something in the subconscious mind, Danielle, that this person is not completely aware of on a conscious level, and that's why it keeps terrifying them. If we know what it is, we can do something about it, right? Then our other tools and soothing and knowing our message will absolutely help. But when it's in the subconscious mind, it sits at a level where we don't know that it's there or what exactly it is. And usually where this comes from is things that happen to us very early on in life, even before the age of 6. A child up until the age of 6 more or less is in a what we call a hypnagogic state. It's the sort of state that a hypnotist tries to get us into when they try and make new suggestions in our brain. And it's in that part of the brain, the subconscious brain, where things are stored that are trying to keep us safe for the rest of our life. Our subconscious mind is basically an incredible tool to keep us safe, to help do that. And so things that happen to us early on in childhood, and not only in childhood, is stored there to try and help us look out next time. If something similar to that thing crops up, our brain goes, no, 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 don't go there. It's not going to be safe. So that is my first thought, is it's in the subconscious somewhere, and we need to go and discover what that is. And very often what I've found is it's to do with parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I know with my whole heart that parents don't do this on purpose. They don't go out to try and make us afraid of life and of visibility later on. But for instance, I've had many clients who had moms that were unfortunately narcissists. That mom had some wounding in her past, and that's the kind of parenting she did. And the narcissist parent creates massive wounds for people for their, in their development. And then there are angry dads. When you are 1 foot tall, when you're 3 years old, 2 feet tall, and your dad is 6 foot tall, and he has an angry red face, he just maybe came back irritable from work, and you, the first thing that he sees, and you're in his way, and he just wants to get in the door, that angry red face is indelibly imprinted in a little child's subconscious. That says, big men are not safe, or an angry face, or angry words are not safe. And that's the kind of thing that our subconscious mind is trying to protect us from. We do not realize it comes from there, because by now we've forgotten all of those events. So there are also teachers.
Yes,
You had a question.
that's an interesting one.
Yeah, teachers who can shame children in front of the class. Shame, embarrassment, humiliation are very, very strong emotions to cope with for a child. So it can feel absolutely overwhelming when that comes. And so when that gets imprinted in the subconscious mind, like it's not safe to stand out or to say my words in front of the class, or I had an event where I was 14 years old and forgot my speech in front of a whole class of 30 people, stood there with a red face for a minute of silence. It was the longest minute of my life. And just later on in life, it just didn't feel safe to try and do that same kind of thing. So I would just avoid those situations. And that's where the trouble is. It's in the subconscious, not in the conscious mind. The conscious mind, we can tell ourselves as much as we like, come on, this will be fine, this is going to be safe, it's okay, what's going to happen, they can't punch me. We can tell ourselves this with the conscious mind, but the subconscious mind works 95% of the time. The conscious mind has 5% of the power.
Yeah, and there was another reason that we were talking about earlier that is quite interesting, and that is sort of the ancestral impacts or influences. Tell us about
Yes.
what you've noticed there.
Yeah. So I think um, that's exactly, of course, also something that we're not consciously aware of. But how often did it happen? If we think now of, women have been voting maybe for 100 years, in some countries maybe even much shorter than that, well, a lot shorter. But before that, many women did not have a voice. They weren't allowed to speak up, to give their opinion, they had to obey the man in the house. It was just the way it worked, and for centuries and centuries and centuries and generations before that. So we all have the genetics of our parents and grandparents, every single one of us. And of course, those patterns and those beliefs and so on would have been almost imprinted in the genetic imprint of generations before us. And so we have inherited those traits and those behaviors and so on. There's really good research that points to that we inherit the stress that our parents and grandparents and great-great-grandparents had.
Mm.
So that's a very unconscious thing, as there's things that's been, laid down the lines that we're not even aware of, as those generational things of women not being able to speak up, children not being able to or not allowed to speak up. So there's
Yeah,
so much involved here. It's not a simple thing. It's not a clear cut, this one thing.
yeah. And once this triggering event, or maybe the first of a few triggering events, has been identified, then what can people do next? Like, how have you approached it yourself and with clients that you work with?
Yeah. So I would like to explain it in the form of a metaphor that's really lovely to understand it. If we take the image of a table, if you all imagine just a table. So a table consists of a top, a flat part, and then there's a lot of legs underneath. Some tables have lots of legs, others just have 4, others have 3. So the tabletop is this, let's call it fear of being seen, or fear of being visible, or fear of standing out. But the tabletop is supported by these legs. And the legs are the things or the events that took place in our life that taught us it's not safe to stand out. It's not safe to be seen. It's not safe to be visible. It's not safe to be heard. All of those things. So what we need to do, Danielle, is we can work at the level of this tabletop, but that's very general.
Mm.
The more effective way and efficient way is to go and look at each of those table legs, the events that
Mm.
taught us to believe that thing. Now, what I do is as I work with each table leg with EFT to take the charge out of that event. So most of us can still remember back to a childhood event, and if you think about it, your heart starts pounding, or you feel the shame and embarrassment, you feel it like a cringe or something like that. And that is the sign that something is still active in your nervous system about that event, even though it was 40 years ago. So what we
Mm.
do, I work with EFT. People can use all sorts of tools to do this, but is to take the charge out of that event. So when you look back, you think, yeah, it happened, and I'm okay. But I wonder why it affected me so much, because now I think about it and it's okay. And the more we take the charge out of as many table legs as we can, the less stable the table is, the more it's going to start
Mm.
collapsing, and one day it's just going to be either not there or very little there. So
Yeah.
that's the way to work with it, is to get really specific with what events can I remember that had me feeling cringy or unsafe.
And for those who don't know what EFT is, or maybe what it stands for, can you give us a little quick explainer about that and yeah, how it
Yeah,
works?
yeah, with pleasure. EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. Now that in itself, don't you think it sounds lovely to have
It does.
emotional freedom about things?
Yeah.
And it's a tool that helps us to get calm about things in the past and about things that are
Mm.
happening now, so that we can think clearly, we can make better decisions and take action. So
Mm.
that is especially lovely about EFT, is it can help us to step into some small actions that feel appropriate for us. And so what we do is we tap on stress relief points on the body very lightly while we think about a problem or a problematic event. And EFT just discharges the emotion of the past so that we can get past it. Was
Yeah.
it enough? Was
Yeah,
it?
yeah, that's great. And so you're taking out the charge with that technique. And as you say, there are other techniques and approaches people can use as well. But my next question is it realistic to expect that this terror of being seen will totally go away, in your opinion or experience?
So it's a great question, and what I'd like to say is I'm not 100% sure if it's realistic or not, but I can give you my experience.
Sure.
In my personal nervous system, it hasn't all gone away, even though I've been working with this for a long time and I've been working with it a lot.
Mm.
Another person I learned from some presentation skills techniques, he teaches presentation skills techniques. He still gets nervous before every workshop.
Mm.
I get nervous before we were starting the recording
Same
today. I
here.
had some,
Yes.
some heart pounding
Yeah.
going on and like,
Yeah.
dry mouth and so on.
Mm.
The point is, though, that we can get ourselves to a place where the fear is tame enough for us to step into action. I don't believe it has to all go away for us to be able to step into action. I would love for it to all go away, but while it's not away yet, I can still take action.
Yeah.
And one fantastic example I want to share with you is if you think of a musician, there are musicians who are world-class pianists or violinists or whatever. Some of them suffer from debilitating stage fright,
Mm.
but they still go on the stage and they perform because that is what they're here to do.
Mm.
And I think we can just, if we keep that little thing in mind, is we have work that we want to share. We have important work that people can benefit from. And even if I still have this fear, I can continue to do this work, but I won't be able to do this work unless somebody knows I'm here. And so that's what I try and keep in mind, is that pianist who does it anyway,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
gift the world with that incredible talent.
And I'll just share my own story as well. One of them that always stands out for me is, well, I always remember the first time it happened. I was typing away something on my computer, something that I knew that I was going to be sharing online, and my legs were shaking under the table. And mentally I felt pretty good, actually. I felt, but it was disconcerting that my legs were shaking, because it was like, what the hell, but there was this part of me that was terrified of what, my body knew it was going to do. So, in my case, I just decided, I guess I'd worked out enough that there can be this energetic gap between where we are and the thing that we want to do, and then that gap represents a level of discomfort. And that, I feel that one of the ways I can close that gap is by actually taking the action. And of course, it also helps to have these other tools that we can use to really calm our nervous system. But there, on many occasions, I still get nervous prior to a call or doing a video or things like that. So I think it's important to acknowledge, isn't it, that we can choose to do it. It's, I know a lot of sensitive people don't like to hear this idea of feel the fear and do it anyway. And, that can perhaps be a bit irresponsible, but there are things that we can do to calm. And I think, if I summarize what we're talking about here, it's, I think when people know that they are clear on their message, they know that they've got these tools to calm their nervous system, but they're still terrified. Perhaps what's going on in the back is why? Why am I still? They want an answer as to why they're still terrified. And so what you're saying is that the answer can be, way back, to seemingly insignificant events from when they were quite young. And so for some people that is probably a really good thing to explore, to go back. And so at least you have an answer, you have a reason you know,
Mm.
and then you can take the charge out of that.
Mm.
And then, you know, when you go to actually, you know, take your next step with being visible or being seen, the reality is it still might be uncomfortable. It might not be a total walk in the park, but really that's what we're all dealing with, you know. Yeah.
Yes,
Anything
that's
you'd like to add?
exactly. No, I think you hit the nail on the head, Danielle. Is there's just there's so much we can do with this, and it doesn't have to all go away. If we are 80% okay,
Yeah.
we can take the action, you know, or 70% okay. So it doesn't have to all disappear before we can step into that.
Yeah,
Action.
awesome. Well, thank you for joining me in this conversation, Liesel. I'm going to leave a link below where people can find out more about you, because I know this is what you're doing. You're helping people with this exact thing. You have an offering that is called Safe to Be Seen, and you know that speaks to a lot of people, doesn't it? So I'll leave the details of that so people can take some action on this if they feel that that's what they need to do. So
Thank you
thanks
so
again,
much.
Liesel. It's been a real joy speaking with you and about this topic. So bye for now.
Thank you.